Back down to our feature match area for a little bit more magic here from Grand Prix Copenhagen. Hello and welcome to this, the penultimate round of Grand Prix Copenhagen. We're going to get a chance to see Tim Koenke and Javier Dominguez. Koenke on 11 and 2. He's got a lot of work if he's going to make it into the top 8. But Dominguez on a 12 and 1 record. His blue-white controller has been rocking and rolling for him all weekend long.
Yeah, blue and white control is maybe the second deck I would have chosen for one of the better decks to run in this field. If you know how to metagame it against the red-black decks respectively, I think this is a brilliant choice. And Javier, being the star player that he is really showing that that's true.
It looks like we're actually going to be starting with Martin Hansen and Christian Alström. I believe that there might just be a deck check or something going on our main table. That means that we're going to be able to get you a different little bit of magic from our feature match area. Hansen and Alström both on an 11-2 record, so this very much the sort of crunch time for them. White-black Bernalia for Hansen, Alström on the red-black Chainwhirler deck, which was the one that I picked out as being what I would be playing if I was playing this weekend. And we have a rogue Rich Hagen entering the coverage booth. Rich, what's going on in our feature match area?
Okay. There's about 18 things happening in the feature match area right now.
None of them are magic, Rich.
And I can probably tell you about 1.5 of them.
We're ready.
Oh my God. So, yeah. So to all the viewers at home, we're sorry that this is taking a while. The tournament is in a little bit of standby mode, one might say. And every time we attempt to get 2 human beings under a camera ready to play Magic, something else utterly implausible happens. Think unicorns, think moon landings, think volcanic eruptions. That's the kind of excitement that's going on in the feature match area. And the hand waving that's going on there gives you absolutely no clue to the... carnage is kind of what's going on there. Let me put it like this. There have been some questions about whether people are playing the right people. So that's the first thing that's been going on. And so they've been looking at previous match results and they've been looking at pairings and they've been checking through that. We thought we were just on the verge of giving you actual honest-to-God live Magic with, I think it's Christian Ahlberg against Martin Hansen from memory. I think that's where we got to. That was the one match that looked like they were good to go. They were both sitting there. There was no suggestion that they weren't playing the right person. And then a judge intervened correctly and pointed out that there was an issue with one of their decks, which I think may well have been a 60th card that wasn't the right 60th card, or maybe there was a sideboard card in the main deck, or whatever it was. And that's been resulting in, I believe, a warning to one of the players. And no, I don't know whether it's... I'm pretty sure it's the player on the far side who you can't see because they're not there. And the reason they're not there is because there was an appeal to the head judge. And so, as you can tell, this is why there's not much going on. I can tell you that the gentleman on the left of your screen, which... if I just take a quick look at the deck lists here, is Tim Koenke, who's playing the mono red list. This is his first ever Grand Prix, and he had an ambition to have a feature match, and this is his first one. He's like, I get a pro.
It's the perfect feature match.
It's the most exciting thing ever.
Nothing at all has gone wrong.
No. So
not bad.
I now have to go off air to talk to someone about what's been going on there. As you can see, 1,000 head judges. So we're going to come back to the booth. If we can. There we are. And I'm just going to wave like that, and then I'm going to go away.
The hand of magic.
And if you want to go back to some Pro Tour decks while we sort out what's going on, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Well, we would love to go back to some Pro Tour deck lists, because at least we know that, that one's all done and dusted, and that those lists...
Madness.
Yeah. Well, there's no madness for that PT. That was a few PTs earlier.
All right.
With madness, quite a while ago now. Tarnished citadels and whatnot. But no, we were going to get a chance to look at some more Pro Tour deck lists just for a little bit while things work themselves out. And this is a list that is near and dear to your heart. The green list, green-blue Khan. This version played by Ivan Floch. Talk us through what's going on here, because it's a slightly unusual looking list.
Right, so the point of this deck is to make Karn as powerful as possible, playing almost all of your creatures being artifact creatures, alongside a slew of 11 other non-artifact creatures. So when Karn comes down in this proactive deck, it starts to make 4/4s and 5/5s every turn. And if you thought Gideon was good in the Martyr vehicles, like Karn is pretty good in this deck. However, it comes at a cost. Instead of playing something like Goblin Chainwhirler, your free drop is Scrap Trawler, or some of your cards in your deck are Implement of Ferocity, or perhaps a Renegade map. And while being good and limited, they're not the constructed all-stars that we used to.
Yeah, kind of an interesting one. The green-blue Karn list maybe didn't quite have the finishes that the players that brought it along might have hoped for. The metagame ended up being very heavy on the Goblin Chainwhirler decks, and maybe the draws didn't quite pan out. I know that obviously when it comes to the Pro Tour, its finishes aren't just down to the constructed list. Sometimes if you have a bad draft, the wheels can come off before you even get to pick up your 75 cards, and in that regard, a little bit harder to distill, even from looking at the Pro Tour, what the absolute best decks would be at some Pro Tours. At this last Pro Tour, though, those 3/3s for 3 that do 1 damage to each creature and player and planeswalker in play.
Sometimes you miss the metagame, sometimes you have a bad tournament, and sometimes your deck isn't just as good as you thought it was. And trust me, it's happened to me before.
By the sounds of it, it happened to quite a few people at this particular Pro Tour. Some combination of all 3 of those things.
Oh, yeah.
It was a veritable murderer's row of people drafting on Saturday at the Pro Tour. But, we still had quite the top 8. Owen Turtonwald playing for potentially winning his first Pro Tour. Wasn't quite able to get there. It was ultimately Wyatt Darby with mono red. And I guess
well deserved as well.
Yeah, very much so. And one of the interesting things for me was coming out of the Pro Tour, obviously red decks are very powerful, but is it mono red? Is it red black? That's a question that maybe we'll have an answer to by the end of this GP, but we have heard that apparently it's time for a bit of a magic over in our feature match area. I think we should head over to our feature match area and not hold up the tournament any longer and see if we can see a little bit of magic even Grand Prix Copenhagen. Hello and welcome, guys, to the 13th round here at Grand Prix Copenhagen. Tim Kernke, Javier Dominguez, they've got smiles on their faces. They're going to get to play a little bit of magic. And we got mono-red aggro against blue-white control. Mono-red has the potential to be unbelievably aggressive, and that could potentially spell a few problems here for Javier Dominguez. He's on 12-1, so already in great shape to make top 8 here in Copenhagen. But Kernke, if he gets one of his very, very aggressive draws, could throw at least a little dent in those plans, maybe mean that Javier not able to get to the record that he might want to be able to get the play as often as he might like.
Right. I think this mono-red aggro list has a better matchup against blue-white control than the red-black deck does. However, Kernke's list does consist of 4 Abrade, which are kind of awkward in this matchup, given that Javier does not run any Torrential Gear in his deck, only Teferi and Approach of the Second Sun to actually win the game. So that means that he has 4 dead cards, where maybe a red-black list would have had even more dead cards, since while those Shocks and Lightning Strike can definitely deal with creatures, they can only also go upstairs if your opponent doesn't have any creatures, which is a pretty big thing in this matchup. Playing mono red also means he's playing 4 or a ton of copies of Moment Courier, as well as Earthshaker Kenras, which normally are not that fantastic against Goblin Chainwhirler, but are fantastic against control.
And we saw Javier Dominguez here, a lot of respect for the amount of damage this red deck can deal. Seal away on the first 2 creatures played by Tim Kernke. Plenty more creatures coming along, though, in Karizev and another copy of Bomat Courier. Lightning Strike just going straight to the dome. No need to get cute about where that one's going anytime soon. And by the looks of things, we may have Javier Dominguez missing land drops, and that is definitely not where Control wants to be.
No, definitely, Tim. In this matchup, we can see that Javier kept a 2-lander, but because he had multiple things to do on turn 2, multiple seal aways, as well as Syncopate and Negate. However, the thing with these red decks is that they have tons of burn, and they can burn you out later in games. So if you don't turn the corner, even if you cast one spell every turn, you're just not going to get there anyways, because you need a Teferi to stick on the battlefield, or you need to cast one approach to second sun to even have a chance. And
end of turn lightning strike. This is exactly the way that you tax the mana of your opponent if you want to try and resolve a big spell. End of turn, play a spell. Ask if there's counter magic. In this case, while Javier Dominguez does have counter magic, he was a bit wary of using it when he knew that he might have to cast a Settle the Wreckage here.
all right, so interesting enough, Tim could have actually stacked his triggers slightly better. If he made it, since Javier is at 2, he could have done it so that the Bowmet Courier trigger resolves first, and then the Monkey comes in, because then Javier can't respond to the Bowmet Courier getting a card underneath of it, because if it does that, the Ragavan will come in after the Settle Wreckage resolves, dealing the 2 last points of damage to Javier. So this way, actually, Team Kinky misses one card that he otherwise could have gotten off Bowmet Courier, and we'll see if that punishes him here.
I mean, Javier Dominguez feels like the one who's being punished thus far. He's missed land drops. He's on 2 life against a red deck that we know is replete with burn. And the good old post-combat Uncrop Crasher coming down for Tim Kernke.
Yeah, I love playing Uncrop Crasher post-combat here. There's a good chance that Javier has tons of counterspells in his hand, that it is awkward all game because Tim's curve and creatures cost so little mana, and which is exactly what happens. And Tim Kernke does not get punished for that Bowmet Courier trigger.
Well, Kernke had said that one of his goals for his first GP was to get a feature match. He's got a feature match. He's playing the 10th best player in the world, and he's won his game 1.
Not bad, not bad. And now this we come into sideboard, and I think Tim actually prefers. It's kind of huge for him that he wins game 1, because usually these blue-white decks are ahead in game 1 because they have such a. They construct their deck in such a way to force your opponent to have dead cards, because those decks will have to respect other decks by playing removal spells, which has no targets against a blue-white deck. But being up a game in game 1 against blue-white control makes it so much harder for them. However, he has to think about how much do I hedge against something like Lyra Dawnbringer that could be lights out in the matchup.
Now, I guess one of the interesting things to me, I feel like game 1, the mono-red list against blue-white is a little bit better. After sideboarding, though, if you're playing red-black, you have access to hand disruption, which is not available for this mono-red list. In terms of the overall landscape of a match, so not just game 1, but your full potentially 3 games that you're playing, would you rather be on mono-red against blue-white or on red-black?
I think it's very, very close. I honestly think it's kind of hard to say which one is favored, but I think that perhaps mono-red is slightly favored. It all depends on how the mono-red deck is constructed. How you construct the mono-red deck, and how much you respect the other decks in the format, and how much you're all in on just kind of doing your own game plan. Because as proactive as you can be, the better against these blue-white decks.
All right, so all that shuffling, all that preparation, all that time that Tim Kernke was waiting for his first game. And the first game was very quick, it must be said. 47 minutes, 57 seconds left on the clock here, by the looks of things, for these two.
Might shuffle even more than we're playing, right?
Yeah, couldn't hurt.
So looking at Kenke's deck list here, you could already see him respecting the amount of Shane Worlds being in this tournament by only playing 3 Bowmet Courier and going up to 3 Rekindling Phoenix instead of 2. So he's running the full 4 Hazard, of course. That's the namesake of the deck. But he went up another Rekindling Phoenix. And Bowmet Courier is miles better than Rekindling Phoenix in this matchup. So already right there, he's losing a little bit by respecting the amounts of Shane Wheelers in the room, which might as well has taken him this far. But in this matchup, that's not going to help him. However, we can see he also has free Fight with Fire in his sideboard, which is going to be a perfect sideboard card against these Lyra Dawnbringers. As we talked about earlier, not only is Fight with Fire a good hedge against Lyra Dawnbringer, but Blue-White's main way of dealing with your aggression is cellular wreckage, and cellular wreckage gives you tons of extra lands, alongside something like maybe Chandra Torch of Defiance, can actually help you kick Fight with Fire for going for the 10 straight damage to the dome.
All right, so this time it's Javier Dominguez on the play. He just has a tapped land on turn 1, meaning that it's Tim Kernke that gets the first damage through with Bomat Courier unopposed. Getting that Bomat Courier down, kind of nice. It means that he has some source of damage and potentially even source of card advantage the longer this game goes on. We saw Javier Dominguez very quick to use Seal Away in game 1 against the Bomat Courier. The same exact play we're seeing in game 2. Carry Zev the follow-up here, though it's now Kernke who's missing on land drops. Realistically, his deck less likely to feel too punished with fewer lands than a control deck.
Right now, both players are kind of hitting all their land drops, which is, of course, as you said, important for the blue-white deck. And Javier can kind of keep up even though he's on a mulligan. However, he has an approach to Second Sun in his hand, which is a dead card until a lot of turns. And this is a problem for him, because even if he answers all of these threats one by one, he still has to hit his land drops towards approach of the Second Sun, meaning he needs to draw some kind of card advantage to manage to both cast his approach of the Second Sun while keeping up with Kernke. And he hasn't managed to find anything yet, and this is going to prove to be a pretty big problem for Javier.
Walking Ballista comes down on 2 for Javier, and that at least gives him some way of blocking and killing a few things. But Uncrop Crasher will make it so that the best that Walking Ballista can do is shoot down Earthshaker Kenra this turn. And this is an attack for 7. Once again, Dominguez finding himself very, very much on the back foot here. 6 life, not very much to toy with, especially when this mono red list has as many ways of dealing additional damage as it does. And you can see there, just a little bit on the edge of the screen, Javier Dominguez, his head in his hands a little bit. What has happened here that this red deck is just so casually able to dismantle everything that he's got going on?
Well, Javier, as I said before, has had a lot of 1-for-1s, and he has this approach in his hand. And while mulliganing, he doesn't have a lot of cards to work with. And without having something like a Glimmer of Genius, it's hard for him to represent many more things than the things that he has in his hand. So he can't really keep up bluff a Cellular Wreckage while keeping up, say, a Glimmer or anything, because he has to also respect what's happening on the board. And here he makes a cute play by blinking a Seal Away, drawing an extra card, and in that way trying to get rid of the Rekindling Phoenix, kind of exchanging targets for the Seal Away.
Yeah, he upgraded what got sealed away there by allowing Bomat Courier back in the game and instead saying that he wanted to have...
interesting. So here we have an Abrade in response to the Rekindling Phoenix, but this way he gets an egg back and hopefully he can get back his Phoenix. However, there's a Walking Ballista on the other side of the battlefield, so that won't work. But this meant that he got to trade an Abrade for that Walking Ballista on the battlefield, but in a very, very fancy way.
We don't mind a fancy play or two here and there.
Sure. Although this way, it's a little bit more than fancy. It's also good in the way that he gets to keep his Bowman Courier, because if he just abrades the Walking Ballista on the battlefield, he responds by killing the Bowman Courier, but this way that Walking Ballista has to use his counter immediately to deal with that Eggmental, or what are we calling it? Eggmental?
Eggmental.
All right. I'll leave that to the professionals.
This is why I get the big bucks. So settle the wreckage here, allowing Tim Kernke to search for lands. I'm pretty sure he'd rather have just kept creatures in play, if we're perfectly honest. True. This is not the world that he finds himself living in. Loads of lands to work with for him now. A very thinned out deck. Ooh. And Lyra Dawnbringer coming down. This one of those cards that red decks often have to have very specific answers to if they're going to deal with it.
Like Fight with Fire?
Fight with Fire would do it. I mean, if we look at the amount of lands available, he was very close to being able to kick that Fight with Fire. And if we assume that there's more than one copy that's been brought in from the sideboard, it's not out of the question that we'll see a kicked Fight with Fire happening at some point in this game. And if that happens, well, Javier Dominguez easily on less than the amount of damage, less than the 10 damage that Fight with Fire does with Kicker.
Yeah, that's why I said moment of truth earlier, because I knew there was a Fight with Fire in hand, and drawing a land there would have been excellent. Not only does Javier cast his Lyre tapping out, because we know that Javier has a negate in hand, so this was like the perfect opportunity to draw land and finish this game off, but Team Kenko will also be content with actually having an answer for Lyra when Kavir casts it. Only that is a problem. Ooh, a tap land for the approach.
That's
This
very
is
unfortunate.
game over.
And there's the handshake. Tim Kernke, you can see there a little little stunned, and Javier Dominguez probably feeling that same sense of what just happened, but for slightly different reasons.
Right.
This is Kernke living his magical dream right now.
Yeah.
Any of us, when we sign up to go to a GP, this is what we're hoping for, is that, you know what, I feel like my deck's pretty good. Maybe if I go along this time, everything will work out and I might find myself deep in on Sunday with the potential being top 8. Now, there are some people for whom that's slightly more reasonable.
Right.
You've had your fair share of success at GPs. But for anyone that's looking to come to a GP, if you've got a good deck, if you know how to play it well, a little bit of luck on top, anyone can be in the top 8.
It's the dream, right? He got to play his first Fitch match. He got to win against a very good pro.
Top 10 pro.
And he also
finalist of the World
played very well on camera. It's just a small trigger that he missed, and they finished everything else with grace.
And we're going to get to see more magic from our feature match area soon enough. Do not go anywhere. More magic after these messages.
This is our prize wall where you can get anything from playmats to booster packs to singles to t-shirts. There's pretty much something for everybody.
Hello, ladies and gents. Everyone around the world enjoying a little bit of Grand Prix Copenhagen. We have already seen one match in our feature match area as we're getting down the stretch here in the red zone. But you know what? We'll head right back on down there and get a little bit more magic from our feature match area. This time it is Martin Hansen on white-black Benalia against Christian Alström in our time walk match. Hansen, I believe, on a Malta 6 here. Both these players at 11 and 2, so really needing to find a win this round if they possibly can, because that win very important in their overall trajectory in the rest of this tournament. Toolcraft Exemplar and Hearts of Kieran, normally best of buds, but this time facing one another down as foes. Heart of Kieran, though, coming along at just the right time that Toolcraft Exemplar, at least here, getting to do some good work, getting stuck in here for Martin Hansen.
Speaking of right on time, we'll see if there's a Goblin Chainwhirler on the other side right on time. And this is why we didn't see a lot of white-black lately, because Toolcraft Exemplar so bad against Goblin Chainwhirler, while Toolcraft is amazing against exactly every other deck in the format. Goblin Chainwhirler is just such a big factor that, well, we see this happens.
Now, Heart of Kieran's on both sides. Right now, only one of them crewable. It seems very likely that there'll be a way for Martin Hansen to be able to crew his Heart of Kieran here, because it's almost every creature in his list has been specifically picked out for the ease with which it can have 3 power to be able to jump in a car when needed.
And we can see, as the deck is called, it's called White-Black Benalia. And it's because History of Benalia is such a powerful card. That's the namesake of the deck. However, it's not great at crewing just Heart of Kieran. This turn, we could have played History of Benalia, which would have been the card that Martin usually would have wanted to play, because it's the most efficient play, both mana-wise and damage-wise, over a few turns. However, he couldn't cast it because that would render his Heart of Kieran useless this turn, and that way he just loses too much tempo. And instead we see a Scrap Heap Scrounger.
So Scrap Heap Scrounger coming along, crewing Heart of Kieran, and that means that Chainwhirler and Heart of Kieran can attack. The trade happening between the two vehicles, 3 points of damage being dealt by Goblin Chainwhirler, and 2 mana left conspicuously open by Christian Alström here. Hansen not taking the bait of blocking the 3/3 first striker. So many different tricks that could mean that that block would end up very poor indeed.
Indeed. It's just also too important for Martin to get this Heart of Kieran off the battlefield. I believe I see a top to rest also that could have done it, but it's just get it off as soon as possible, because he wants to develop his board with, say, a Walking Ballista or that History of Benalia in hand, and perhaps save the top to rest for a rainy day.
So Lightning Strike targets Walking Ballista in turn targets Scrap Heap Scrounger. The net effect of all this is far fewer creatures on the battlefield. It's Scrap Heap Scrounger versus Goblin Chainwhirler in this round 14 match.
Right, and I think they're talking about the life totals over that? No. Okay, yeah. Christian Alström at 13 here, getting corrected. And I believe, so the Lightning Strike wasn't that efficient, because that also meant the Scrap Heap Scrounger got off the battlefield. However, I believe the reason why Christian did this is to be able to cast Chandra on this battlefield, being a little bit more protected. And we'll see if we see just that. We'll see if Christian decides to deal with Scrap Heap Scrounger. Even though it's going to come back, that also means there's a chance that his Chandra is a little bit more safe. And with Martin not, of course, having his Chainwhirlers in his deck, going down to 1 is less scary here. But instead, he takes the very proactive, aggressive route.
I mean, I like getting the damage on. There's little downside to making sure that your opponent is just dead that one turn sooner. Hansen on 7 life after that Chandra activation alongside Goblin Chainwhirler attack. Lots of mana to work with now for Hansen. He's certainly not going to be getting busy blocking, so he might as well attack that Chandra. 3 points of damage to her, so her loyalty down to just 2 now. The life total 7-13 in the favour of Christian Alström. And Alström with both a Planeswalker and a Goblin Chainwhirler on the board, I would say ahead not just on life, but also on the board.
Right. What's kind of awkward here is that Christian hoped that this proactive play would make Martin having to deal with Goblin Chainwhirler, so he could get to activate his Scrap Heap Scrounger. However, since Martin's deck is great at exiling creatures, that plan didn't really work, and now we have a Scrap Heap Scrounger that's about to deal with this Chandra very efficiently, and Christian is kind of wish he maybe destroyed that Scrappy Scrounger the turn he could have. And we'll see if a Bowman Courier is going to be the thing that's going to stand in the way for a turn, and also in the end being able to bring back Scrappy Scrounger at the end of it, or if it's going to attack. All right.
I mean, with the life totals being what they are, I can definitely see the appeal of that attack. But if it ends up costing Chandra, I don't know that that's necessarily worth it. Though I suppose that it does mean that subsequent attacks, if Christian is able to make them, mean that he could get 2 cards relatively easily, traded his top deck for something better.
I feel like it would have been better to stay back, even though Martin has a way to kill it on board. He has the Ifnir Deadlands, they can destroy the Bowman Courier and then get in for the final 3 damage on Chandra. But if if Martin Hansen elects to go for that, that costs him his entire turn, and then he can bring back Scrounger, putting Martin down to 2. And this way, Martin will have a tougher time turning the corner. The upside of the play that Christian made is that he will get more cards under this Bowman Courier. Oh.
Fatal push in response to the trigger. May as well sack the little postal bug there to draw a single card. The other card's still going to get exiled. The trigger was on the stack. And Christian Alström really needs to hope that the card that he's found off that Bowman Courier is a good one.
Yeah, I think it was Scrap. No, Heart of Kiran. Okay, so now with Bowman Courier actually in the ground, finally as food for the Scrappy Scrounger, Heart of Kiran has a way to get crewed, and that's lethal against Martin Hansen. So without Martin drawing something here, Christian could have lethal next turn.
Martin Hansen, White-Black Benalia, lots of knight potential. We've just seen the one enchantment itself generating knights this game, but I believe that there's Knight of Malice in the mix there somewhere.
All right, so if Martin goes for activating the Chef in the Tunes, which is kind of the only play he has, Christian just knows that there is nothing that can stop his Heart of Kiran getting in for lethal damage this turn, and I believe that's what he's going to do.
Just 6 life left for Christian Alström, but 6 ought to be enough here. End of turn, along comes Scrapheap Scrounger, exiling Bowman Courier. That Scrounger can crew Heart of Kiran. No flyers on the battlefield for Martin Hansen. Tapped out. It seems like a win in game 1 here for Christian.
Unless we have some kind of life totals incorrect here. Okay. Nope.
No, it looks like Martin was just making sure that his opponent was able to go through those motions. As it turns out, those motions working out relatively straightforwardly for Christian. So he picks up game 1, and it looks like game 2 already well underway. A tap land on turn 1 for Christian, so he looks on as Scrapheap Scrounger, the first player of the game, coming on the other side of things.
Right. Post-sideboard, the matchup gets a little bit better for Martin Hansen. He gets to remove his 2 craft exemplars, which usually in his own case makes him remove his Heart of Kirans because he has less ways to crew them. And he kind of goes into a transformational sideboard where he brings in Doomfalls, Fumigates, Heartless Pillage, maybe even Ixnan's Binding, more Planeswalkers, Lyra, Shalai, all those kind of big threats, and going a little bit bigger instead of being too susceptible to the red burn spells and, as I said earlier, Combination Whirler, of course.
Well, it's Doomfalls all around here. It does see a copy of the card in Christian Alström's hand off his own Doomfall. Chandra, Rekindling Phoenix alongside Doomfall in hand. So not too much going on early doors here for Christian Alström. We'll see what Martin takes in just one mere moment.
Yeah, actually, we can see Ixnan's Binding in Martin's hand, and it's actually an excellent card in this matchup. Not only does it take care of multiple of the same threat, but it exiles something, and which can prove to be detrimental in such a mid-range matchup where it's about trading blows back and forth, and if one removal can if you can make a removal be a 2-for-1 with tempo, that's just amazing in this matchup.
All right, so Doomfall on the other side reveals Walking Ballista, Ixalan's Binding that we've been speaking about, Karn, Sign of Urza, and that Knight of Malice there. So 4 pretty reasonable targets for some sort of removal one way or another. Is it going to be Planeswalkers in the bin all day long? Or in exile, should I say?
Yeah, I think the only choice here that's reasonable is between this Karn and the Ixalan Binding. All right, should take the Ixalan Binding because I believe Christian has a Rekindling Phoenix that is going to pressure this Karn pretty well, unless Martin draws some kind of other answer to the Phoenix. So I think that's going to be Christian's plan to a little bit more smoothly take care of the Planeswalker that way.
All right, well, no big surprises that Rekindling Phoenix comes along. It was Unlicensed Disintegration, the draw there for Christian Alström, so the potential for him to surprise at some point at a later date. For now, though, Martin Hansen just drawing plenty of additional cards with his copy of Karn.
Right, and clearly Christian is going to give him the second Karn since he removed the first Excellence Binding, leading up to this exact play. Giving him the Excellence Binding after removing it would not make a lot of sense. So this leaves Martin with a choice here. Either he can cast his Walking Blister for 2, or he can cast an untapped land and go for the Ifnir Deadlands, I believe, to shrink this Phoenix so Karn is less threatened by attacking every turn. But opts to go for the Ballista.
I guess that with the Ballista on 2, you have the option of still doing that Deadlands play next turn and finishing off with the Ballista if you need.
Right, that's definitely true. But this way, Karn actually takes additional damage. If you go for Ifnir Deadlands first, Karn only takes 2 damage, and then next turn you can make sure that you deal both with the Egg and the Phoenix, or the Elemental.
Indeed. Goblin Chainwhirler coming down, that little cheeky point going to Karn from that. Looks like the Rekindling Phoenix itself just going for Martin Hansen here. Alström keen to try and close out the clock on this game a little bit.
Yeah, I think the reason why Christian goes for Martin's life total is because he has another Karn in hand, and dealing with both of them having such high loyalty might be an issue. However, with an Excellence Binding under that Karn, it's just going to be very difficult to get a reasonable attack towards Martin here.
Yeah, worth remembering that with the Karn, when you exile cards, they get a silver counter. That means that any future copies of Karn can still fetch back cards exiled. It's not as if they're tied to the one instance of whichever Karn that got played.
So now with Excellence Binding on the battlefield, Martin will never have to play around a Rekindling Phoenix again, which is a pretty big deal in this matchup because powerful flyers are the best way to deal with these Planeswalkers that Martin has so heavily relies on post-board.
Also nice that the Ixalan's Binding are tricky to remove white permanent, meaning that Knight of Malice is going to be a 3/2 first striker. That meaning that it will happily fight with Goblin Chainwhirler all day long.
Right. So I think what Christian is deciding here is whether he wants to deploy his Chandra and Unlicensed Integration, or just the Unlicensed Disintegration plus the Cycling Land here. And it seems like he goes for the Cycling Land play. I think he needs to continuously pressure Martin, because as every turn goes on with his card in play, he's just going to lose ground and succumb in the amount of card advantage that Martin will get from this Karn. And with the new rule change, we can't redirect damage to Karn, of course, so Martin Hansen takes 3 damage, but I don't think Christian minds, because I believe he's going for the life total regardless here.
Yeah, all of the burn being sent straight upstairs, not that there were too many other choices, and here Karn continuing to tick up on loyalty, the option being History Benalia or Walking Ballista. With the amount of lands in play that Martin Hansen has, Christian initially goes, well, you know what, you can have that History Benalia.
Right. Now with History Benalia in play, he's going to have sufficient blockers to protect his Karn, and about to mount some kind of offense here. And I would have liked for Martin to start going for some constructs with Karn, because with that Walking Ballista, they grow insanely fast. Especially with that second Karn in his hand, he can pretty much make a construct every turn for the upcoming turns. And the more the merrier, as the constructs say.
Is that what the constructs say?
That's what they told me.
Fair enough. All right, so along comes Walking Ballista. A little cheeky hit there on Christian Alström's life total. The Knight token ready to potentially jump in the way if Hansen prioritizes keeping Karn around.
Yeah, I think Christian just has a Chandra and a land in hand, and it's just not going to be enough against this board. You need to draw something awfully great, awfully fast, and it has to be something such like a glory bringer. Can't really be a hazard, can't really be anything on the ground. Rekindling Phoenix, well, can't play that because of Ixalan's binding, of course. So we're looking at glory bringer or Buster, I believe. Okay, Martin Hansen taking this 3-3 normal chain is kind of scary because one of the few ways he can lose this game is kind of getting burned out by hasty creatures and burn spells, because he has such an advantage on the board and in card advantage.
History Benalia making a second knight here, and at the end of turn we saw Walking Ballista ticking up to being a 3-3 now.
Right, I think this turn you go for minus on Karn because playing that Walking Ballista for 3 is quite powerful, because together with that other Walking Ballista that plays around any future Glory Bringers, having those with 3 counters each on the battlefield means you can point 4 of those counters towards that Glory Bringer before it gets to attack, so pretty big deal.
In the meantime, of course, Walking Ballista able to team up with a knight to attack in on Chandra here.
Right, okay, I think we're going to have a second Ballista, and not passing on the turn, I believe.
Yeah, nice looking board state all of a sudden for Martin Hansen. Yes, Christian Alström has the life total advantage, but he recognizes the writing on the wall, scoops up his cards. We're going to be going to a game 3 between these two gentlemen as they both vie to get to 12-2. 12-2 means that going into the last round, there's a reasonable chance they would go to pick up a draw, whereas the other way around, well, it's all right, crunch time, have to win, and then kind of hope that
no pressure
pans out in terms of pairing. So, yeah, these guys, this game, among the most important games that they'll have played all tournament at this stage.
Yeah, it's going to be a very nervous game for both of them, I believe, and we'll see if the red offensive player
and his attack's really not looking too exciting. We did have a little issue with our audio there for a moment or two. We hope that you guys are all back and it's not interrupted your enjoyment of the stream too terribly much. And a Braid coming along here to clear a path for Kari Zev and Solskjaer Mage, and of course triggering the prowess of Solskjaer Mage here, meaning that this attack, if unimpeded, will actually do a fair amount of damage to Martin Hansen's life total.
Yeah, I think Christian realizes here that given how the game has kind of played out, Martin doesn't have a ton of things in hand, because otherwise he would have deployed them already. Also, there was a slight hint of Martin using the infinite deadlands and his main phase, giving Christian even more information. And because of that, he goes for aggressive play by abrading the Knight token, which, I mean, it's not a fantastic deal since you're only dealing with less than half of a card. However, Christian realizes that he needs to get in the points of damage that he can while he's able. And this Heart of this also means that if Martin doesn't have a response here, this Heart of Kiran is lethal on the board.
Yeah, I mean, this is Christian Ahlstrom very much playing a tempo game. He's not playing a game that is well set up to win if the game goes super long. He's allowing Martin Hansen to build up his board maybe a little bit more than he might otherwise, but the place where Christian Ahlstrom is very much ahead is on life totals. And Gideon here, an interesting addition, because if Gideon chooses to get an emblem here, then it means that Christian Ahlstrom, even if he's able to deal the last 4 points of damage with Heart of Kiran, will not win the game.
Right. I think that I'm kind of pretty curious about him using Scavenging Grounds last turn, just to exile a Braid. Also, this Doomfall should have been exiled, but since it's a time walk match, we can't go back in the back in time to fix that problem. But I'm not sure what that actually does for him. We, however, is of course going to see Gideon using his plus ability on Heart of Kiran because it's lethal this turn, and as long as he can keep bubbling that Heart of Kiran and at some point deal with it, he can go for the emblem later on. Okay, I don't think we can cast that Hazoret.
Not be in play because of Ixalan's binding.
Oh, okay. It's a little bit awkward looking at this in Time Walk Magic, but of course we can't do much about that at this time. It's an easy thing to forget because Ixalan's binding, there's not a lot of... It's not a very common card that you see, especially in people's main deck. People usually choose to play Cast Out instead, and it's usually just a sideboard card. And since it usually exiles a permanent that you just forget about for the future, sometimes people have a tendency to miss its second line of text there. Which
very relevant line of text right now, though.
It is definitely a very relevant line of text right now. And this is going to put Martin at 1, and with that Hazoret that shouldn't have been able to be cast, that's actually lethal next turn if Christian gets activated.
Very unfortunate turn of events here for Martin Hansen if it ends up playing out this way.
Yeah. Well, this is what happened in this match. With the Hazoret on play, he can survive with the ability of Gideon, but this is just a lifeline that it's not going to work for forever. Alright, and I wonder if they're going to find this out now that he gets a second Ixalan's binding, presumably for the Hazoret. Alright, okay.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Martin Hansen has now figured out what's going on, and yeah, very unfortunate turn of events. Clearly, it has been a while in game turns since that second Hazoret got cast. The judge now intervening as Martin Hansen asks the question as to what happens in this.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure, Tim. What does happen? There's been a lot of things that has happened, a lot of choices based on that Hazoret being on the battlefield, permanence lost, cards drawn.
Yeah, maybe too late, unfortunately.
Yeah, Karn being activated. I'm not sure if they can rewind the situation as so many things have happened since. We'll see how they resolve this. Alright, seems like
play is continuing.
Yeah, plays are continuing. And it makes it even more awkward because this Ixalan binding, of course, has to deal with the second Hazoret as well. Because otherwise Christian always has the opportunity to put Martin at a negative life total and then deal with Gideon in some way, will then finish the game. think Christian drew a Scrappy Scrounger here, which means I believe he has lethal here. If he crews the heart, goes for Gideon, and then points both the monkey and the Karisev towards Hansen, that should be lethal. All right.
And there is the handshake. An unfortunate turn of events for Martin Hansen there. Whether or not that Ixalan's binding was going to end up being pivotal, hard to say. I think the game probably would have gone on a good few more turns. But given the position, at least in terms of life totals, the tempo game that had been played out there, it may have been that it worked out the same way.
Sure.
I guess that we'll never know. So that is the end of that match for you. We will have more magic for you soon enough, right after these messages.